The sharing of biased and false
news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these stories simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears.
Allow me to introduce our American visitors. I must ask you to forgive their somewhat lackadaisical manners, but I have conditioned them, or brainwashed them, which I understand is the new American word.
It is a fact that shitposting and public opinion are now instrumental communists. But really, they're part of the big two opposing factions. Which are? What? One. Some of them are really wealthy families. Their one thing is to maintain stability, or at least that's what they call it. The other group is Eisenhower's industrial military complex. And they want to maintain instability, so they say.
So you're saying that Group 1 is warring with Group 2?
Yes, at some levels they're at war.
You can't tell me with your accent that me as an American,
I work for the CIA. I am not a spy. I just read books.
Rules of reception. If they're black, then it's a gang. If they're Italian, it's a mob. But if they're Jewish, it's a coincidence, and you should never speak about it.
Yes, sir. You take an ordinary man and turn him into an assassin. That was our goal. Now, MK Ultra was terminated in 1973, but not the research that I continued. Shall I go on?
The truth will set you free.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. If our traditions with it. Opposed to secret societies. Opposed to secret societies.
People will be reluctant at first to take the mark. But with proper marketing, celebrities, movie stars, sports heroes, they'll soon accept it and then even embrace this new technology.
Mr. President,
Hello.
All right. We are live, I believe, as far as I can tell. Gonna have to get a little bit better with the transition there. I apologize ahead of time if you can hear the fan, but it is hot AF tonight. My little office nook in here gets pretty warm. It's upstairs, but you know, we're gonna do this anyways. We're here. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are or when you watch the video. As always, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your attention. I know that people are busy. It's a valuable commodity, this thing we call our attention. So I appreciate you sharing it with me. There's a lot of stuff going on. We got a lot to talk about. So I'm hoping that the sound is okay. I'm going to do my best not to accidentally turn off the mic or let it die tonight. I just was working on the intro a little bit over the past couple weeks. I know I'm not super proficient when it comes to video editing. That was just what I could put together on iMovie. I know it's kind of corny, but it is what it is. It's what we're working with. And so my policy right now, as far as the channel goes, is to just keep on doing things and keep on moving forward and not try and get too caught up on being a perfectionist and trying to make sure things are 100% ideal, going with the 80-20 principle. So yeah, that's what we have for the intro for now. So I appreciate you being here. I've got quite a bit I want to talk about tonight. Of course, there's always plenty going on. But before, as a way of introduction, before we get into all the details, I just wanted to start off with a little bit of a white pill. You know, I was thinking, I hope you guys had a good Sunday. I had a nice Sunday at church this morning, and it's refreshing to be able to go and worship every Sunday. I love being in the Orthodox Church. It's such a gorgeous place, you know, to do really anything, but the worship there is beautiful. And I was thinking on my way home that the contrast between what it's like when you're in a place like a church where you have the solemn, but also the joyful, you have the commitment to aesthetic beauty as well as an intellectual commitment. It's not like a neglect for intellectualness in favor of beauty. It's kind of a bringing together of those two things. And I was thinking on my way home, we live in really fascinating times. You know, it's so interesting to come from my house here in Manchester and go to a church that celebrates the same liturgy that was celebrated 2,000 years ago. And I just start to think about that. And I just think that it's easy to get caught up with all of the doom scrolling and the black pilling. And to be fair, like, things are not looking great, you know, but like, to be honest, but there's definitely a sense that we live in an exciting time. So whether or not it's if things turn out good or bad, it is undoubtedly an exciting time to be alive. There's no reason for anybody to be bored. There's so many things going on that are worth our attention. So I was thinking about that on my way home, just how incredibly interesting the times are. There's so much going on, and there's so much of it is just beyond fascinating, or what we could really expect. But with that in mind, it's not going to be easy. And I'm not, you know, I think people sometimes get a sense from my Facebook posts and things that I kind of doom and gloom around all the time. But I genuinely live a pretty joyful life. I have a big garden that I take care of. I have family that I look after. I have a lovely dog. And the politics and stuff it is easy to get bogged down in the doom and the gloom. And I recognize that. And I don't want to be a place where people think that they're coming to just hear me take people down. And it's not really, you know, I'm not deranged in my thoughts about politics. I don't have, you know, I don't really have any hatred for Donald Trump specifically or anybody like that. But there's a reality to the situation that I think is easy to overlook. And it's important that we address it honestly and, you know, objectively as we can and candidly as we can. So, and in that vein, there's quite a few themes and ideas that I wanted to mention tonight that are kind of converging. And it seems that the more we move forward, the more these three, not necessarily ideologies, but kind of factions in terms of the power structure are starting to coalesce with each other. And one of the most important ones of those is the Silicon Valley technocratic elite, whatever it is that you'd like to call them. More recently, they've been referred to as the PayPal Mafia. That doesn't include Bill Gates and other people like that. But the gist is just that these three competing factions, which all have some representation in Trump's administration, are making moves. They're doing what they do. They're landing contracts. They're striking deals. And I wanted to take a step back and give everybody an idea of how I see where things are going and why they're going that way. We have AI is coming online rapidly, way faster than I think the culture at large is prepared for. And I'm not one of those, I'm not a doomer about artificial intelligence. I don't even really necessarily believe that intelligence artificially is possible for reasons that are probably not worth going into detail now, but if that's interesting to you, you can look into the work of a fellow named Roger Penrose. He wrote quite a long time ago a book called The Emperor's New Mind, but he has some physical science, he has some physics reasons not to believe that a computer can become sentient in the same sense as a human being. So I rule that out in my worldview. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I don't know that for sure. But as far as I can tell, I don't think the thing that we need to be worried about is the artificial intelligence becoming conscious and trying to destroy humans. Or, well, I used to hear those stories often a couple years ago, and that's just not going to happen. But what is happening is AI as a technology is going to be sweeping into all different sectors and parts of the economy, and that is going to have a huge impact. So, I'm not expecting iRobot level, robots running around taking jobs kind of thing, but it is for surely going to make a difference. And this is happening at the same time as Bitcoin and cryptocurrency has recently really established itself in the minds of institutional investors. And what that means is that the power structure as such, whether it's the public facing corporate power structure, which would be your BlackRocks and Vanguards and State Streets and JP Morgans, and you guys know probably all the main characters, those kind of companies are now starting to get involved in Bitcoin in a way that's unique, not just in the sense as BlackRock had ETFs and things like that. So we're going to be talking about how Bitcoin, AI, and the emerging geopolitical structure that's happening, which we're seeing in the form of Trump's tariffs, all of these new negotiations that are happening in the Middle East. So there's a lot of things going on. And when you see it in terms of particulars or in terms of the details, it seems like a chaotic mess. There's just a lot going on. But I think at the end of the episode, if we give some context and we try and put some things together, I think you'll be able to make a lot more sense out of what's going on. And so that's really the focus for tonight. But in general, we live in an interesting time. And in just a few years, the world's going to be completely different than it is right now. And the reason that I did the channel is because I want to try and figure out what's going on, and I want to do it with you guys. So I'm always open to taking in new information. So if you guys are interested in something that you think I should know about, please let me know. Please share the show if you can. Do some commenting, do some subscribing. That really helps me a lot as I'm trying to work my way up to 1,000. So I appreciate that. And so we're going to get into the story here. And I wanted to first start off by just doing a 30,000 foot flyover of the Jepstein McEffery situation. I'm not going to use his name directly just to see how that flirts with the algorithms. But I wanted to address some of the recent, I guess I wouldn't call it a debate, but kind of the back and forth that's happening now on the right wing between what I would define as the more dissident element of the right wing and then the committed sort of MAGA conservatives. And I don't mean this in an offensive way to Trump supporters. I empathize quite a bit with the desire to put your trust in somebody like that. And I recognize the temptation and the fact that a lot of the information that is being used in these arguments, I think, is more speculative than it should be. And I can be guilty of that too. I'll be the first to admit it. But I do think that there's a reason for that speculation, and I think it's pretty well justified. And I do think that the majority of these arguments are a form of cope to try and maintain a positive outlook, So I'm not trying to be condescending, and I'm not punching down. I'm just saying that the arguments don't really hold water as far as I can tell. And I wanted to say some good things first. And the first thing is that I really understand, like I said, the desire to believe in Donald Trump. And I think that the campaign in 2016 was really effective. Like I said the other day, it was effective in communicating this outside the box, new guy in town, gonna shake up the system mentality. And the reality is that people in America, that is what we want. Even on the left and on the right, the majority of regular Americans identify as independent. I think it was more than 50% last election. And so there's a huge portion of middle America, which never really talks to each other because the news and the media and the way that we get our information is so sensationalized that we're often talking past each other because we're focused on issues where we don't really see eye to eye. But the reality is that average Americans who are not obsessed, maybe like I am with politics, or not, terminally online, not involved in the debates on X and Twitter, those kind of people just simply want an uncorrupt government. And they obviously have enough intuition and sense to understand that they've been getting the worst of the deal for decades now. So the majority of people recognize that, and the Trump campaign did a good job in capitalizing on that. And so that's left an aftertaste. And my friend Garrett said it before, there's a sunken cost fallacy going on, where the commitment to the position becomes emotional. And I've been there too. I really believed in Obama, for instance, when I first got into politics. I was really impacted by his speeches, by the vibe of the campaign, the idea of hope and change, the fact that he was African American. All of those things appealed to me at first, and I can understand why. And I think that Donald Trump is capable of convincing a lot of people to trust him. And that's part of the reason why I think that he's particularly dangerous, but also the reason why he's been selected to do what he's doing now. And the other good thing I wanted to mention, the second thing, is that it's still pretty early in the presidency. So we have to keep in mind in all of our observations and all of the conclusions that I draw from here on out, I just want it to be known that I recognize there's time. We're talking and speculating in the moment. Things can change really quickly, as we've seen in the past. And we know that, the one thing we can't do is assume that everything's going to be bad, because that's illogical and it's also not really helpful at all. So I think it's early, so there's time for things to happen, and I think that is a positive. That is a positive in Trump's favor. Unfortunately, we're not really likely to get any disclosure about the Epstein-McEffery situation. So we really are only really allowed to speculate about it. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of contextual information. We know about the connections between his financial doings and the influential and wealthy people in the world. So we know all those things for sure, but without getting a full disclosure from what the FBI knew, from what's on the tapes and what's on all of the stuff that they collected from the house in New York, never mind the incredibly suspicious things that were going on in New Mexico. The whole story is surreal, but it's likely that we're going to be left to speculate. And so unfortunately, it's not very likely that we get any type of closure at the end of this story. So we might be able to draw some conclusions, but in some sense, I'm saying that as a benefit to Trump, because I don't think that there's really going to anything's going to come from this. And it's probably, and I say that sadly. And we're going to look at the arguments that I've been hearing and in favor of what Trump's been doing now. So one of the ones that I hear the most often is, why didn't the Democrats release the info when Biden was in power, right? So oftentimes when you hear people talking about Trump's relationship to Epstein-McEffery, the response will often be, well, if Trump was involved, why didn't the Democrats release the information while they were in power? And now it's like, it's very obvious why they wouldn't do that if they were also implicated. So there's not really, if everybody is involved in the blackmail, you can't selectively just reveal some of it. If it comes out, it comes out. And if it comes out, the entire power structure, generally speaking, is implicated. So, and I don't think that this is necessarily, people, average kind of lower level politicians. It is to some degree, congressmen and senators, or some of them were involved. But I think the blackmail, the more gruesome things that were going on were it's hard to say. It's hard to say because we know the amount of people that were there. So I can't really say for sure. So I'm not gonna say that for sure. But the second argument that I hear, which I think is also not going to hold water at all, Trump is doing it to protect the economy and the business in general. And so let me explain this, because this is more interesting, I think, than why didn't the Democrats release it. And what people are saying is that if if it's true, what we think we know about Jepstein McEfrey, if these lists are chock full with influential people, with wealthy people who make important decisions for international finance, who are involved in trade deals with international business people, do you see what I'm saying? So if it's implied that these people are guilty, it's possible that there would be some short-term economic turmoil, right? So if you imagine you wake up tomorrow morning and there's a video going around on the internet of, Bill Gates with some underage girl, right? Microsoft is going to take a huge hit. There's no doubt about that. But I'm not really convinced by this. I don't think really, if we look at the actions and the positioning that Trump's been involved in for the past 6 months, I just don't really see that as a likely explanation for why he's not releasing the material. It's just, if it were true that it was all a bunch of wealthy people that would impact the economy, I think Microsoft is a valuable enough company that all of the people who are invested in it, besides Bill Gates, are not just going to decide overnight that it's worth nothing, because Bill Gates was a PDF, right? So I'm not convinced by this kind of argument either. I think it's not very likely. And although I do understand, I get the gist of it, I'm not very convinced by it. And maybe you are. I'm not. The last one, which I find to be the most interesting, I guess, a little more interesting than the economy argument, is that Trump actually has the blackmail, and he's holding it to keep the deep state in check, so to speak. So this is kind of like your Alex Jones double agent type of interpretation. I mean, like we said at the beginning, it's speculative no matter how you look at it. All I could say about it is that it's possible. I find it so incredibly unlikely, but it is possible. We can't say it's not possible. And I'm going to get to, kind of how I really see the whole thing. And so those three arguments are the ones that I've heard. I don't really find any of them convincing. I think that the entire sex trafficking aspect of this whole investigation or this story or narrative, whatever you want to call it, it is a bit of a red herring. And I don't say that as in it's never happened or it's not true or I don't believe it. The reality is it's very likely that probably the worst of which you imagine happened in this whole situation is true. The amount of, who is involved, we'll just never know. But the sex trafficking it's a sensational part of the story. It tends to grab headlines. But what it also does because of that is it takes attention away from the deeper connections of the story. And so if you imagine yourself as somebody like Leslie Wexner or the Bronfmans or somebody who is a multi-billionaire CEO, corporate, private equity, right? And Jepstein McEfrey has this information about you. It's better to take the heat for the sex trafficking, which we know already that Jepstein could plea out of and get a sweetheart deal from Alex Acosta. So they know that the public is going to be drawn to the sex stuff, and it is particularly gruesome. I'm not trying to belittle the trauma and, don't come at me. I get it. Like, it's bad. I'm just saying that the financial part is really important because that is where, even though the sex trafficking is connected and we have this speculation that he was involved with all these people and they're going to the island, and that is important. Like, the victims deserve justice, of course, all of that. But the majority of the coverage of the story didn't really touch at all the people that Jepstein was connected to. And I think that was the intention. And it's almost even beneficial for the real culprits, like the people who are genuinely behind Jepstein. I don't think they care that the press is worried about Trump's relationship to him. You see what I mean? So there's kind of like this release valve that's happening because the intention is being redirected in a kind of, alchemical way to try and produce a new narrative. And from the beginning of this story, the people who had investigated his real ties and connections are not really ever getting the airwaves. You know what I mean? So it's very clear that the mainstream media was happy for us to think about the sex trafficking, talk about the sex trafficking, share news stories about the sex trafficking. But how many of you have heard the name Leslie Wexner associated with Jeffrey Epstein? So if you have not really looked into it, you would not even know the connections really. And so he was visited by everyone. And the reason was not always that people were just trying to have sex with underage girls, right? Epstein, like I said the other night, sat at this nexus between the realm of kind of dark finance and the public facing realm of finance. And so that type of person who's also working for intelligence, they predicate their whole life's meaning on obtaining valuable information, right? And so the blackmail comes hand in hand with the fact that because you have this money and you can philanthropize people, so to speak, it was possible for people who wanted to do something or wanted to get funding for something, and they wanted to do it privately and they didn't really want to do it on the books. Epstein was the kind of person that could make that stuff happen. And oftentimes that was not necessarily related to sex trafficking or illegal, right? So there's, people like the Dalai Lama visited with Epstein at his place in New York. And I think a lot of people get the sensational part of this story and they don't see, they see this story in their mind and they're like, oh, the Dalai Lama is going to procure underage women from Epstein. It's like, no. He did a lot of things, and sex trafficking was just one. And the reason he did that was simply to obtain blackmail. He himself was a pervert. Like we all know, he probably was involved, and all of the victims have testified that Epstein is an absolute disgusting pervert. So I think we can rest easy knowing that that's probably the case. And so, but my point is just to say, as gruesome as that is, as sensational as that is, it's not the most important part of the story. It is equally, I guess you could say it's equally as important. But once you understand that his role as a blackmailer, as somebody who was obtaining information that was really even more valuable than money to some degree, because he had all the money in the world. So now what I wanted to get to is what does this have to do with Trump? What does this have to do with Bitcoin, right? Like, how do I really see Trump? And I think in order to make this simple, what I want to do is just say that there's been a growing momentum of people in America who have been on a process of becoming aware of, the rabbit hole that is the US government, right? And I think when I was 17 or 18, when I first began this journey, which is a long time ago, but when I first got into this, the new information was about the Federal Reserve. It was kind of about pharmaceutical companies and fluoride, and and what I've noticed over the years is that people have consistently, or however it is that the zeitgeist of information has developed, it has been consistently becoming more sophisticated in its understanding at a more general level, right? So the average person knows about the Federal Reserve now. Now, when I was 18, 19 years old, nobody knew what the Federal Reserve was. Like, it was a revelation to tell someone that the Federal Reserve printed the money for the United States government, that it wasn't a part of the federal government, that it didn't have any reserve. Like, that was a mind-blowing thing to tell people when I was 19. And so the reason I say that is that since the inception of the Federal Reserve in 1913, and since the Bretton Woods Agreement, which established the modern monetary order in the West after World War II, right? The how would you say this? The apparatus of finance, the people who are involved with creating, executing, maintaining the monetary system in the West, they knew from the inception of the Federal Reserve that it was an unsustainable style of monetary system, right? And you have to understand this. It's so important because the way that these agendas are executed is they're planned out for a long time. the banking families and what I would loosely describe as a multi-generational, transgenerational pool of capital, right? Which was developed and made into what it is a long time ago, but it has carried on through the generations. And there's all sorts of different stories about how that happens, not, sidebar. But my point is just that the financial system as such was created to be destructed. The way that the boom and bust cycle works, the way that the Federal Reserve is able to raise and lower interest rates, the way that they're able to control the amount of money in and out of supply, it gives them basically a button that allows them to pump the market when they want to and to dump the market when they want to. And I say all that to make you understand that what's happening with Bitcoin is, it's fascinating, of course, in many ways. And let me preface everything that I'm about to say with, I don't give financial advice. I can't be responsible for whatever decisions you make with your money. If you know me, you know kind of what my positions are, but I'm not a professional in any way. Please do not think that I'm a genius or a wizard in any way. But just as a disclaimer, right? But what's happening with Bitcoin is special because it is offering a new way of doing money that allows people right now I don't know why that keeps happening. Oh man, how long was that muted? Oh, it was only a couple minutes. Oh my God. Sorry guys, I don't know why the microphone just stops working. Awful. Yeah, I don't know why that keeps happening. So why is it that, what is it that Bitcoin has to do with all this? Well, you have to start off by understanding. I'm going to try and rehash what I just said for a while, but thanks, John. I appreciate that, man. I'm sorry. I didn't see it on the screen. I can't tell. And then I just looked and the light was off. So what this has to do with Donald Trump, what does Donald Trump have to do with Bitcoin? What does Bitcoin have to do with Jepstein McEffery? So in order to make sense of this, and I'm going to try and do this as quick as I can, in order to make sense of this, you're going to have to understand that from the inception of the monetary system that we have in the West now, from the beginning of the Federal Reserve, which is who prints our money, it's a private bank, it's not federal, they don't have reserves, you know, that was revolutionary insight when I was 19. And a lot has changed since then, which is great. And a lot of people understand this, but I want to make it very clear that from the beginning, from the creation of the Federal Reserve, the central bank owners, the people who own the shares of the central banks in America and in Europe, they were aware that it was a system that wasn't sustainable, that it wouldn't last, because it creates debt and it's impossible to avoid it creating debt. The only thing it can ever do is create debt. The trick is that as the debt's being created, if you're part of the clique of people who have access to low interest money as it's being created, then you can use that to your advantage. You can buy assets, you can invest in companies, you can do all these things that allow you to use the debt money quickly to get yourself something back that's not debt, right? And so if the average people can't do that, it's really not helpful to them at all. And so for over 100 years now, this system has perpetuated itself, right? The Federal Reserve creates the money, it creates debt. We raise the debt ceiling. We find creative ways to tax people to take more money from average people. We find more creative ways to charge them things that they shouldn't really have to pay for. That's all happening because of this huge debt funnel, right? And here's the other thing that you have to understand. When you see somebody like Elon Musk or Donald Trump talking about paying off the debt or paying down the deficit, just understand you can't use debt to pay off debt. If we wanted to pay off the deficit tomorrow, it would do so much damage to the dollar. It would be destroyed overnight. It would literally destroy the dollar if we paid off our debt. So understand that's not ever going to happen. It's not possible because the money itself, the money that we would use to pay the debt off is debt. All right. So you have to understand that. And so if you're the movers and shakers of the central banks, right? If you own the shares in these central banks that print the money in all these different countries, and you know that the monetary system that you've created has a time limit, it has an expiration date, what you do is you ride the wave, until you can't anymore. And so at some point down the line, and I think that there's two possibilities for Bitcoin. One is that it was created by some genuinely revolutionary computer programmers and software engineers that understood very exceptionally how money works for some reason. And they might have been libertarian minded. They might have been just interested in making the world a better place. There is some good information about the history of Bitcoin. There is some forums where, you know, people like John Nash, who's a mathematician, were discussing what looks to be, you know, preliminary Bitcoin ideas. And so at the end of the day, it's either a ragtag group of programmers who genuinely wanted to create a new financial system, or and this is the less fortunate possibility, it is the creature of the NSA, the CIA, the central bankers as such. And if you think from the perspective of the central banks, it makes a lot of sense. You know, if you know that the system's not going to work forever, if you know that there's an expiration date on the monetary system, and either you discover online or through your mutual financial networks that somebody is creating this new digital form of money that could be helpful to you, right? Either you find them and you co-opt it, or you have an anonymous guy named Satoshi Nakamoto create it in the first place, right? And you just, it's anonymous, it's completely hands off. Oh my God, look, this new monetary system has just appeared out of the ether on the internet, and it's open source and it's an open ledger and everybody can see it, right? So those are the two possibilities for Bitcoin. And now, why does that matter? Because, like I said at the beginning, we live in really interesting times. And one of the reasons why I mentioned that is because we are on the horizon. We're kind of on the event horizon of a new financial order. And I don't say that to creep you out. I know, you know, my old school libertarian friends, if they hear New World Order, they're going to, you know, shit a brick. But what I'm saying about the New World Order is that there's a possibility, I should say, for a different type of financial system. And I think Bitcoin represents that. So what does this have to do with Trump? Well, if you think about Mr. Jepstein McEffery and what it is that he was exactly doing, he was blackmailing people. He was involved in what he called himself a reverse Ponzi scheme, right? He was making money disappear or making money appear where it should or shouldn't be, right? So Jepstein McEffery is very close, it just so turns out, with all of the PayPal Mafia. So I'm going to shrink myself here for a second, and we're going to look at a little, I just want you guys to see a little wheel of all of the PayPal Mafia people. So you can take a screenshot of it or whatever. I'm sorry, I know that's not perfectly clear. But if you look at this guy at the top here, Mr. Peter Thiel, and then you also have another guy here, Mr. Elon Musk, and Reid Hoffman. He's a left-wing version of Peter Thiel. And so this circle of technocrats, people who are involved with creating new technologies that are beneficial and helpful to the security state and the surveillance state, right? This is pretty much what they do. Well, PayPal, interestingly enough, PayPal was kind of like a first attempt iteration at something like a digital money. Now, it wasn't the same as Bitcoin, but the thing that you need to understand is the way that these networks work, right? So Elon Musk makes satellites, Peter Thiel does security, whatever, he does surveillance, Reid Hoffman does financial stuff, let's see, David Sachs is involved in media. Like all of these people have different tasks that they contribute, but they all contribute to an overall ideology. And that overall ideology is a revolutionary new form of governance, which brings along with it a new form of monetary system, right? And so what you need to do when you see these kinds of things is just understand that just because when they tried to do digital money with PayPal and it didn't work, just because it's not called Bitcoin and just because it's not an open source ledger and it doesn't have the blockchain, those things are not as important as the overall sentiment. Because even if these guys or the NSA are not responsible for creating Bitcoin, they are certainly over-invested in it. I mean, if you consider Michael Saylor as well, who is a very suspicious character who emerged onto the scene as a multi-billionaire and has been going around convincing people to custody their Bitcoin with some company instead of self-custodying it, because then you can borrow against it and you can lever it up and then you can lose it when they margin call you and the economy crashes. But these people, you have to understand, Bitcoin is, whether or not they create it on purpose, we'll move on from that. I personally think that's likely. I think in terms of conspiracy, maybe a little too much. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It's fine. If it was just a heroic group of hackers, then, I mean, that's super cool. And all the power to them. I thank God they did it. But we need to understand that when something like Jepstein McEffery happens, there's no way to separate necessarily the technological aspect from the financial aspect. And that's my point, is that Jepstein McEffery, even though you don't see him on this list here, right? You don't see Jepstein McEffery anywhere on the circle, right? He wasn't the PayPal Mafia, But every one of these people, they all have the same transhumanist, technocratic ideology. And now, why is that important? Well, we were talking about the Federal Reserve before. We know that this financial system has been in place for a long time. So what happens when the old guard is dying off, right? And that's exactly what we're witnessing. When I say we're living in interesting times, we are presently observing the passing of the torch from one generation of managerial elite class to the next. And the next class of managerial elites are going to control the financial system through cryptocurrency. Okay. And now what does Trump have to do with all this, right? So we know from the beginning that the system was created to fail, right? The creation of the Federal Reserve was so that the financial system in the future could be efficiently destructed. It was created to be destructed, okay? And it's done. I'm not saying it's done no good. I'm not like a rabid like anti-capitalist or something. I understand that wealth can be a good thing. The problem is that the system started, it created an enormous amount of wealth really quickly that was distributed relatively fairly at the time. The problem is that what happens in these cycles, if you can control the supply of money, is the boom cycles happen and they create a bunch of wealth everywhere. But then once the inflation hits or once the debt becomes too much of a problem, all that money is then articulated back to all of the corporate structure. So it's sucked back out of the middle class. And then the next crash happens while they hold all the assets. And then the new cycle begins again. And the goal is always to ride the wave as long as you can and to pull out at the top. That's what they do. And so what does this have to do with Trump? This is an article in the New York Times. Now, I don't, please don't give me the New York Times. I know, I get it. I don't read it. I don't think the New York Times is great. I don't read it every day, but it is the paper of record, all right, for the United States government. So that's something. And I do think that they can write a good article. And this one, it's not that important where it comes from. So as Truth Social business struggles, Trump media goes big on crypto, right? You guys remember when Trump was campaigning and he went to the Bitcoin conference and he said, "Look at me, guys. I'm going to make crypto the best." And to be honest, he really has. If I was going to say one thing positive about the Trump campaign, I am financially benefiting from Trump's positive attitude towards cryptocurrency. So, full disclosure, I'm still going to criticize him, but I am profiting from it. So just to be honest. So the pivot to crypto highlights the reality of Truth Social, one of President Trump's highest profile business interests. It doesn't generate much revenue. Uh-oh. So I'm not going to go through it word by word, but I just wanted you guys to see Trump and his children and his business partner, Howard Lutnick, and Howard Lutnick's children are creating businesses to purchase Bitcoin for themselves and also to issue stable coins using the Bitcoin to back it. But I'm going to go through just the beginning, right? Donald J. Trump has reinvented himself many times over, going from real estate developer to TV personality to world leader. Now, his social media company, Trump Media and Technology Group, which is the parent of the president's Truth Social site, is undergoing its own metamorphosis, becoming a major player in the crypto industry. In just the past few months, Trump Media has raised $2.5 billion in cash to invest in Bitcoin and is working to bring crypto-related exchange-traded funds, or ETFs, to market. Mr. Trump has no official position at Trump Media and does not advise it on corporate policy, but he is the company's largest shareholder, and he and his family have become big crypto boosters over the past year. The pivot to crypto highlights the reality of one of the president's highest profile business interests. Truth Social may serve as Mr. Trump's online megaphone, which he uses to attack his enemies, praise his allies, and announce executive orders, tariffs, and ceasefires. But the 3-year-old social media platform has struggled to generate advertising revenue. Okay, so what does this tell us, right? What does this tell us about Bitcoin and Trump and Jepstein? Okay, so Jepstein McEffery is dying, and the story that surrounds his life is dying with him. Why is that important? Because the old financial system all of the grime and the blackmail and the nasty things that were done that Jeffrey Epstein was literally in the center of and participating in often, all of that's gone now. Okay, so the old system is basically all of its dirt and all of that nasty stuff that happened is like, oh, we're just going to move on from that. We won't think about that anymore. And at the same time, Trump and the people in his administration have been literally working nonstop to do what? Mass deportations? Nope. Guess what they've been working really hard to do? They've been working really hard to make their own cryptocurrency companies so that they can benefit from this coming transition when we move away from the fiat dollar and we move towards a cryptocurrency and a Bitcoin reserve and stable coins. Okay. So the reason I point this out is because Trump, this is a huge signal, is pretty much what I'm saying. It's a huge signal. Trump, the people in his administration, everybody that they're involved with, including Peter Thiel, including Reid Hoffman, including Alex Karp, Palantir, all of these companies are right now competing to buy the most Bitcoin. They're all trying to do this. Why? Because they know that the new financial system, which is going to be backed by Bitcoin reserves and is going to give everybody that owns Bitcoin the ability to issue their own stable coins, right? So remember how we talked about how the Fed prints the money for the government, how everybody learned about that? What they're doing is they're digitizing that process. They're streamlining that process, and then they're giving that ability to anybody who's willing to hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet. They will be allowed to issue stable coins against that Bitcoin and earn yield while buying US treasuries and debt, okay? And the most important thing about all of this, right? The whole purpose of Trump's, what I believe is really not necessarily the only thing that Trump's administration is meant to do, but one of the most important. Trump is going to solidify and concretize this movement of technology into the realm of finance. And now there's going to be some hoopla and some changes, you know, there's going to be some ruffled feathers and people are going to argue, some people get fired, you know how it goes, right? But at the end of the day, everybody in the system above Trump, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, JP Morgan, the Fed, the SEC, the CIA, the Mossad, like you just draw the whole hierarchy, right? This has to happen for them. They're not doing it for us. They're not interested in making our lives better. But for now, like during this time, we have an opportunity to use the tool that they're using to save their ass, right? So you can buy Bitcoin and you can hold it in self-custody and you can peacefully and non-violently protest against the Federal Reserve System by removing value from that system. And you can benefit from it financially. If you hold it, it will be worth more in the future, right? And so if it is that we're going to give corporations or anybody that's willing to hold Bitcoin on its reserves the ability to issue stable coins, what does that mean for the dollar, right? And now enter Israel, and now enter the Middle East, and now enter the geopolitics, because Trump has said for a long time that he supported tariffs, right? And generally speaking, as you know, a nationalist-minded person myself, I think tariffs are a good thing. They need to be done intelligently. They have to be done, you know, in an academic way and in a way that works for the country, which is not how they're being done now. I do think they will have some benefit, but my point is just to say the tariffs are not for the purpose of bringing manufacturing back to America, okay? America is never going to make cars again. We're not going to be making Ford and Chevys in Michigan. Like this is never it's gone. Like it's gone. The whole point of the tariffs is to create the environment. It's meant to bring everybody in the world to the negotiating table, because as this new financial system comes online, there's going to be a lot of hassle and back and forth about who's going to pay what, how are we going to do this trade, what's going to happen here, who's going to be there. And so what you're seeing in the Middle East now, from the level of the BlackRocks and the Vanguards and the State Streets, the people who own the central banks, they are using Trump as a Trojan horse to get their geopolitics into the Middle East and to negotiate a new financial system which is going to be using money from Saudi Arabia. It's going to be using money from the UAE. It's going to be using money from BRICS, which is the alliance in the East that kind of is the antithesis to NATO and the Western financial system. In Israel right now, in Palestine, the powers of the East and Russia and China and the powers of the West of Europe and BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street are working out the beginnings of a new order, a new multipolar order. And what that means is that the US is no longer going to be the reserve currency. The dollar is going to lose its reserve currency status. It's not going to crash or disappear. Like, I'm not, being a doomer or anything, but the reality is that this new system is coming online. We have no say in the matter. It's happening. It's coming. Like, there's already over $2 trillion invested in Bitcoin. It's going to be bigger. It's already bigger than Google. Like, it's happening. It's coming. Okay. And so BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and I believe another 6 or 7 countries now have signed on to BRICS. BRICS has already been doing over $1 trillion of trading outside of the US dollar system. All right. And I've been talking about BRICS for at least 12 years. And it's just now finally getting to the point where they're talking about building all of these new payment systems and rails for people to make transactions outside of the US dollar. Okay. And this is why you see Trump going on Truth Social. Oh, anybody that uses BRICS, we're going to put 10% tariffs. We're going to do this. You're going to get sanctioned. This is going to listen. All of the hoopla between the East and the West. I'm going to tell you what I think. I believe that the overall direction of geopolitics in the world has already been decided. I don't think that we're on the brink of a world war. I don't believe that this is going to descend into crazy chaos. What I do believe is that we're going to see a prolonged conflict with Russia and Ukraine, but eventually I do think that Russia is going to win that war, and that's going to be the end of it. And I do believe that BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street are happy to sacrifice Ukraine. And I think that that's been loosely agreed upon. And I think that it's unfortunate. And, I'm putting on now my geopolitics hat. I'm not saying I believe this is good or I support it or I want Russia to defeat Ukraine. Okay. Geopolitics hat. Now I take my geopolitics hat off and I speak from my own moral positioning. I think all war and killing is reprehensible unless it's, because of self-defense and on a genuine threat. But all that to say, we're witnessing this toss-up now between the West and the East. And the way that appears in America is tariffs. Now, what do the tariffs do? The tariffs make it so that the dollar becomes weaker. Okay. And Trump, he will be signaling to the public, we're going to make the dollar great again. But everything he seems to do is making the dollar worse. And so it's pretty clear to me that if you are positioning yourself in crypto, you're not really talking about it. It's kind of behind the scenes. Everybody in your administration has positioned themselves in crypto. They have businesses. They're going to be issuing stable coins. Not only that, but the guy, being Elon Musk, who gave you $200+ million to get you into office, is talking about using his social media platform to become the WeChat of the West. He said that in 10 years, XAI or X is going to be one of the biggest banks in the world. And you won't have like a regular banking institution. You won't have like a, mom and pop shop bank situation. So you have to see these signals and take them for what they are. And so what does that mean for us? Well, it's pretty simple. And this is my policy going forward. I'm not suggesting anybody else do this. I'm not giving you financial advice, but my goal is to have more Bitcoin every month than I had the month before. And I'm going to do that for as long as I possibly can. And I know people who have done it, and I know that it's worked out. But it's the one option that we have that's nonviolent, that's peaceful, and that really does something. Like you're actually making it possible for you to have some kind of political leverage in this new system, right? Because this is for the majority of people, what's going to happen is they're going to ignore crypto. They're going to ignore AI. They're going to say, oh, that shit's dumb. I'm not worried about it. It's for nerds, or Bitcoin's fake. It's a scam. It's going to crash, right? And when it does happen, that the dollars really start to lose their value, and trust me, they will. It's been It's taken everything that the government has had to shield the public from the amount of inflation that's already happened. It's like literally we've spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars to try and keep inflation from really doing what it's going to do. And it is going to happen. So when that does happen, all of these companies that own 10,000 Bitcoin, that have been buying it for 10 years, that didn't tell anybody else to buy it because they don't give a shit about them, all those people are going to be fine. It's going to be all the people that have 401ks, that have stocks that are not worth anything, that are holding all of their money in the bank in dollars. Those are the people that are going to pay the price. And that's the plan. Sadly enough, that's the plan. And I think if you look generally speaking at what Trump is positioning himself for, it's very clear that they're looking to capitalize on this new coming system, right? It's simple. It's not hard to understand. And there's a whole other aspect that I won't have time to get into tonight, because when we look at Trump and we try and analyze what his motives are and what exactly, we might speculate he's doing, we're looking at one aspect right now, which I would consider kind of the technocratic and financial aspect. But there is also the Israel situation, which a lot of these things have a connection at some point, because the majority of the cyber security and basically the Silicon Valley of the future is going to be in Israel. And so there's a plan for that as well. But it's important to recognize that Trump's decisions are always the product of somebody that gave him money. I know it's like, it sounds like stupid leftist and simple, and it seems cliche to just say like he's the business guy, but I'm telling you right now, that's who he is. It's who he is in his being. He is a man that loves money and power and being respected and loved. It's just what makes him go. And it's okay. Like, I'm not, it's not a huge problem, but it's just the reality of what it is. So when you see Donald Trump, when you see Howard Lutnick starting to try and create ETFs so that they can buy Bitcoin and issue stable coins, when you see that BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street already have ETFs, they're owning hundreds of billions of dollars in Bitcoin. When you see Michael Saylor at MicroStrategy literally borrowing as much fiat money as he can to buy Bitcoin with, when you see all these things happening, you have to put the picture together and draw the conclusion that we are in the preparatory stages of a new financial system. It's going to be a hoopla to get it online. It's going to take time. We don't know how long it will take, but it is coming. And the best thing that you can do is prepare yourself for it. Invest in Bitcoin. That's what I'm going to do. I don't know why anybody wouldn't do it. Let me just say this, right? If what I believe is true, if the world is really onboarding this new financial system, right? Most of the assets in the world are going to be denominated in Bitcoin at some point, okay? Bitcoin is around $3 trillion right now, total in market cap, all right? Market cap just means all of the money that's invested in Bitcoin. It's $3 trillion. In the world, presently, there's like 200 and something trillion dollars in assets, okay? So it's like over 100x for Bitcoin to just get to the point where the assets of the world are denominated in Bitcoin. And what's great about Bitcoin is that it's not the US dollar. So it's not going to be limited by the proof of weapons network being able to bully people into using dollars, right? The reason why Bitcoin's valuable is because it's decentralized, because anybody can use it, right? And I'll give you a couple examples. If you look at Bukele in El Salvador, the amount of Bitcoin that they purchased and the amount of good that they've been able to do is incredible. And every country is going in this direction. Javier Milei in Argentina is doing it. The only difference in America is that it's going to be corporations that can do it. And so what does that mean? I'm going to try and wrap it up as far as the finance stuff with this. All right. I want you to think, if you see the AI is coming online, right? We know that they're building this infrastructure to really integrate AI in not only into our lives, but into the decision-making apparatus of the federal government. Like right now, Palantir and their Lavender program is already being used by the IDF in Israel to identify, track, and give targets so that supposedly Hamas people are being killed with it. Like this is happening, like all this technology is coming online. But if you think into the future, right, we're going to use this AI in some centralized fashion to give us information about what to do in the future, right? It's going to become a kind of oracle. It already is like that now. Like people are already using it that way, generally speaking. And I'm not, I'm not a Luddite. I'm not like against AI officially or in any extreme way, but I'm just saying that that's coming. Like it's going to be integrated into the government. It's going to be giving us advice and suggesting better ways for us to carry out our lives, apparently. And so if you think from the perspective of the AI, they're going to say, what is the best way to run the economy, right? And what will the AI say? It will say Bitcoin. Bitcoin's going to be the way to do it. It's already decentralized. It's already digital. It's open source. Anyone can use it. It works immediately. It's scalable, the whole thing, right? So this is the direction things are going. We're going to have AI. We're going to have technocratic governance. We're going to have cryptocurrency. And I want you guys to be ahead of the curve, and don't be goofy. Oh, I hope I didn't shut that off. All right. Don't be goofy. Don't spend all your money on Bitcoin and remortgage your house or anything and lose all your money. But, be smart about it, but do it. Don't keep thinking about it. Don't be stupid like me and keep pushing it off. All right. I've been at this since like 2012. It's embarrassing how little money I have for how much I know. And so please don't make that mistake. Don't do what I did. Consider it, look into it. If you have questions about it, you can ask me. I'd be happy to talk to you guys about it on YouTube or over on Facebook or wherever you can find me on Instagram. And I just wanted to say a couple things to wrap things up. I think that it's important that we recognize an opportunity when there is one. And it's important not to get too bogged down on the back and forth and to commit yourself to a plan. But I can tell you for sure, the Bitcoin financial system is coming, and the dollar cannot continue to go the way that it's going. And I think geopolitically this makes sense. I think financially it makes sense. And I think in terms of the agenda, the people who own America and finance everything that it does, those people want Bitcoin to be successful. And how do we know that? We know that because BlackRock has an ETF. They have hundreds of billions of dollars invested in it. All of the most important people who invest with BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street are invested in Bitcoin. They're literally falling over themselves to get more fiat money to buy more Bitcoin. And once it comes out that companies are able to buy Bitcoin and hold on their reserves and create stable coins and buy US debt, right? Once this catches, once businesses recognize that they can shield themselves from the coming crash in the dollar by just holding Bitcoin as reserves in their treasury, it is literally going to be a race to see who can own the most Bitcoin. And we're seeing just the beginning of it now. It's only a few companies, not even that many people know about this yet. If you're connected in investment banking, like people know about it and they're setting it up. But Donald Trump's whole administration, the purpose is to create new demand for US treasuries. And they're going to do it on the short term. They're going to create short-term bonds so that they can use the short-term debt to buy more Bitcoin and lever it up until the inflation finally catches up to the dollar and they have to let it go. So I think that's where we're at, and I'm not doom pilled about it. I'm not too worried. I'm happy that we have this opportunity, and I would say that it's really, really useful. Bitcoin can work. So if it doesn't work, it will be because of some greedy somebody who messed it up. But as of right now, I think that's where we're headed. And I hope that's useful to you guys. I hope that you're not getting too caught up in the Epstein stuff. He worked for Mossad. He was blackmailing our politicians. The only reason we're not going to find out about it is because they're all guilty. It's very simple. Don't think about it much more than that. So don't believe the hype, guys. Stay smart out there. I really appreciate you all. If I can connect with you somewhere, please let me know if you have questions, or if you want to do a show, if you have some things you'd like to share and you want to come on and we can Zoom call or do whatever. But I'm going to try and do this every other night. So let's see, today is Sunday. So on Tuesday night, I'll be back, and I want to try and do something a little more, maybe like a little more reactionary. I'll have some video clips and we can talk a little bit about what people are saying. And then I'd like to get into doing some philosophy as well. So I really appreciate you guys. I hope you will stick around. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that, or share or comment. You guys know all those things really help me, because this kind